Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. Today, we are going to be talking about a class that I attended recently by the one and only Ben Stoeger and Matt Pranka. Now, there's a little bit of a story behind all of this. As some of you may know, I had Ben and Matt on a live stream that sort of went sideways for most people involved.
I haven't really said anything yet, to be fair. No, I'm just fucking attack you for no reason. So the dude sitting to your left is like a sarcastic dude. So like I'll destroy fucking you like on this live easy. I mean, I will say like as far as the pedigree goes, I think it's one of the best finishes in WWE history.
But I think we'll talk about that towards the back half of the video. The important part is that I was given the opportunity to go take a class, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, this was a very last minute adjustment, so I was somewhat unprepared as I was supposed to be in Vegas for SHOT Show to do filming. So the only equipment that I could carry with me, or fit in my bag, I should say, was my Glock 17 with a IWB holster and 400 rounds of ammo. So I was somewhat under-equipped for the class, but we'll talk about that as it goes. Now, if you're not familiar with me as a shooter, I've been shooting for several years now, and I've done some competitions a long time ago, nothing recently whatsoever, and I've only ever taken one other class. So my second class was from Matt Pranka and Ben Stoeger, because most of my shooting, unfortunately, if you're familiar with the channel, is by myself. So there's very little chance to get grading or instruction. You kind of have to figure everything out on your own, which works to a point, but getting graded by, some of the best shooters around is quite a bit more beneficial. Now, the first thing about the class that I personally really enjoyed was there wasn't a long discussion period before we actually got going. The class started, I believe, at about 9 o'clock. And within 10 minutes of some preamble discussions, we were shooting doubles at speed, which is kind of how I prefer to do things. So after that, Ben went through a grip demonstration. Now, grip is one of those topics that people like to talk about a lot. Now, if you're looking for an hour-long dialectic discussion on the differing dissertations on grip, this is not going to be that. He simply runs through how to grip the gun. If there's a problem, we'll fix it. Right here, you can see Ben is demoing grip on about a half dozen different guns, everything from staccatos to, of course, the tiny little 365 there, and he is absolutely drilling out the center of that target. Please ignore the target on the right, as that is actually mine. But as you can see, the entire discussion was about 6 minutes. Now, the format of the class was pretty simple. Ben would talk about the drill, Ben would demo the drill, and then if there was anything else that Matt wanted to dig into a little deeper, give his thoughts on, or something like that, that's usually how the format would go. Ben would talk, demo, and then Matt would fill in at the end. And then as you're actually shooting the drill, I believe there was about 20 to 30 students there. There were a lot of us there. Then they would kind of fill in, and as you're running the drills or whatnot, then they would come up, talk to you, look at your target, see what you're doing, milling around and talking to people as you're actually doing the drills. Now, I'm not going to talk about every drill that we did, just the ones that I thought were the most important or impactful to me personally, and the ones that I actually learned a lot by seeing someone demo them and give me feedback on my personal shooting. So I'm not going to cover everything in the class, just the ones that I feel are the most important to me personally. So starting off, we did doubles, always pushing speed, because if you're shooting like a really, really tiny group, that looks great, but like benching 30% of your max, you probably should be pushing a little bit harder, right? So that's always the thing, is to be a little bit uncomfortable and actually pushing yourself. So even at doubles at like 7, 10, I think 12, 15, 20 yards or so, it's always about pushing the speed and being a little bit uncomfortable to kind of see where you start falling apart, create some issues so that you can then fix it. Now, we probably did between 50 and 75 rounds of doubles at varying distances in sets of 4, so 8 rounds per sequence. And then we moved on to the bill drill, which is every Instagrammer's favorite drill to run. Now, about halfway through the bill drill session at different distances is when I had a user-induced equipment malfunction. So I got this Holosun 507 comp about 2 days before the class. I took it out, I zeroed it, I put 100 rounds through it to just test to make sure that it actually worked, and then I called it good. Unfortunately, 200 rounds into the class, the screw on the right decided to disappear. I completely lost that, and the one on the left worked its way about half. So I went from having like pretty decent groups of about, A's and C's to now having just a group that covers the entirety of the target. And at first I was like, well, John, it's just because you suck. But it was also that, but also the dot was barely attached to the firearm. So at that point, Mr. Stoeger actually lent me one of his personal Glocks, one of his Glock 47s. So I shot the first couple hours with my 17 and the last 500 rounds or so with Mr. Stoeger's 47. Now, I did get some questions about the differences between the guns, and they're very, very similar. So mine is a 17 with a Apex enhanced trigger kit and the connector and a 4.5-pound striker spring. So it has a enhanced trigger. It has a homebrew stipple job, which is incredibly effective, and it has a big Holosun 507C on it. Mr. Steger's Glock, which I believe is set up by Joel, who actually has a really good video on how he sets up the Glocks. This one specifically had a Glock performance trigger in it with like a different shoe on it, and it was like hand polished or something like that. Very aggressive Talon grip tape, which was very aggressive. I actually like that quite a bit. And on top, we have a Holosun 507 comp, although this one is the much cooler Ronin Tactics in green. Now, the only other difference is that Ben had a brass plug in the back of his grip, so it was maybe an ounce or two heavier, but at the end of the day, they're both 17 size handguns. They both have aggressive texture. They both have a semi upgraded trigger, and I had a big window on top. So in terms of shooting difference, shooting them back to back, I personally didn't notice much difference, and I'm probably not good enough to take advantage of any difference if there was. Now, if you actually want a little bit more detail on how exactly Ben's Glocks are set up, Joel actually has a full video on it, and his channel is criminally underrated, so you should go check it out. Now, post-equipment failures, we shot bill drills all the way out to 25 yards, and I was actually pleasantly surprised that I was able to maintain speed or still push speed and still majority hit A's, some C's, and if I did something especially retarded, get a D in there. Now, this is something that I have absolutely done wrong for the last however long I've been shooting. To look good on Instagram, you shoot bill drills very quickly from 5 to 7 yards, you don't show your hits, and you call it a day. And that is something that I have practiced quite a bit. And something that Matt Pranka actually put on towards the end of this drill is really the work really happens between 15 and 25 yards. Shooting it that close, again, I think he said something very similar to that, where it was like, yeah, shoot it up close, put it on Instagram, and then actually get into your training. Because much like, again, benching like 30% of your max for 20 reps, probably not that useful, right? So actually shooting bill drills at further distances, 15, 20, 25 yards, that's where you're actually pushing yourself, still maintaining speed or pushing speed and maintaining accuracy. And this has led to probably one of the biggest differences in my personal shooting going forward, is that just stop wasting ammo at 5 and 7 yards. It's kind of worthless, might look cool online, might look cool in a video, but it's not actually useful to me personally, right? And if you want to become a better shooter, you want to get better, actually push back the distances, right? And so it was very good in a class setting to be able to do that at extended ranges, which is something that I don't really practice at all, to see how I perform, to see how I'm doing wrong, to be around people who can give me instruction and know what they're talking about. And just that alone was probably worth the 12 hours of driving. Now, there was a little bit of a lunch period where I actually had to run into town to get another 400 rounds of ammo so I could continue shooting. But moving on from there, we had some very interesting transition drills. So the first one, which was a kind of a confidence builder almost, was essentially you start out the drill pointed directly at the target. Beep goes off, you pull the trigger, and during recoil, you transition to the other target. So gun goes bang, and then you immediately look to the other target, and in recoil, the gun just moves there, right? So again, this is just a single shot drill at this point. So you have a spot on your close target that you've picked, beep goes off, pull the trigger. As soon as you pull the trigger, you pick your next spot that you're already looking at on the next target, and during recoil, the dot lands there, right? And so it's just a single shot, and you go back and forth. Immediately switching your vision, you're not waiting for the dot to come back down and then dragging it across. You're simply during recoil already transitioning your vision, and then the dot just lands there, right? And so it's essentially like bouncing between. So you can do this, should be able to do this anyways very fast, which leads into the next drill, which was either the ping pong drill or the Punisher drill. I forget the name of it, but it is doing that 8 times in a row at speed. And this is the drill where everything fell apart for me. Every issue that I had with my vision, with putting too much input into the gun itself, with not being focused in where I was looking, which we'll talk about all of this, really came into play. So again, now we go from a single target, a single shot, transitioning during recoil, which I felt very confident in. I was like, oh, this feels great, fantastic. To now doing it 8 times in a row at speed. So essentially you're going bang, 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 and trying to transition your vision during recoil, picking a spot on the next target as soon as the dot is there, as soon as you get that color confirmation, pulling the trigger again, and then immediately switching your vision, right? And so, as you can imagine, doing it once, pretty easy. Doing it twice, that's okay. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, back to back to back to back, that's where basically everything fell apart. So I was not nearly being precise enough with my vision where I was actually looking at the target. First 2 shots, first 3, 4 shots might look okay, but then after that, it would be, I would just start staring at the dot itself, or I would tense up because, oh, I got to go really fast. And now I'm tensing up way too much. I'm putting way too much input into the gun and I'm driving it down because, of course, you're trying to do this as fast as possible. So everything that could go wrong basically went wrong. And we did this drill a lot. We probably did 80 rounds or so, maybe even 100 rounds on this specific drill, which is a great drill and something that I've implemented into my dry fire, being very precise with my vision. So sometimes halfway through the drill, so you'd be on shot 4, you would just see a flash of, if you're just not picking a spot on the target, you're looking at the whole target, right? So you see green on brown in this case, because I'm using a green dot. Green on brown, you're just pulling the trigger, right? Where was it on the target? No idea. I saw brown behind the green dot and I pulled the trigger. And this is one of those drills where I threw a couple Ds and lots of far Cs. And one of the Ds was barely on the target. So my vision would fall apart. I would start staring at the dot. I would put way too, like, everything that you could do wrong in a sequence of fire, I was doing, right? And so that is a really good learning tool to me to see kind of where the wheels fall off. So it's something that I've implemented in dry fire. Now going back one drill for a second to the bill drill, you can see my 25-yard grouping on the target looks very much like the seatbelt pattern, and they actually have an explanation for it, and they actually used my target for it. If I can get that footage from them, I will, but if not, you can see that I'm doing both things. I'm following the dot up and to the right because somewhere in the string of fire, I'm like, hey, look, there's a pretty dot. And I start staring at the dot rather than a very specific spot and, wait for that color confirmation to come back. Or I am, freaking out in my mind and inputting way too much pressure and I'm pushing it down to the left, which means that you get this very pretty seatbelt pattern that stretches through the A zone, but unfortunately it also stretches through the C's as well. Now, the last drill of the day was a 4-target transition, with one of those targets being a partial with a no shoot on them. So you need to be a little bit more precise in your vision while still going very fast. So essentially the way that the drill would work is you would have targets at different distances. You would have 4 of them in essentially a square formation where you're standing where you can see all of them. So you have the close one on the front left, and then the back right was the no shoot on it. So partial target with no shoot, you're still aiming for the A zone, but you have half as much space to work with. Some people, it was a lot harder than others because the targets weren't all identical, which is quite fun. And then you have a target at the front right. So the point of the drill was to shoot the first target twice, second target twice, go back to the first. So you essentially ping-ponged between the targets, shooting doubles, right? So I think the entire round count for the drill for one rotation through it was 14 rounds, and we probably did 150, 200 rounds on this one drill, which is really good because it's kind of combining everything that you're doing. You're shooting, you're transitioning, you're shooting doubles at speed. And again, you have that partial with a no shoot. So you need to be very precise in your vision because hitting a no shoot's like -10, whatever it happens to be. It's a crazy amount of points that you lose. So now this drill has all the transitions, shooting doubles at speeds, and you have close targets, far targets. So you're shooting very quick at the targets up close, trying to transition as fast as possible, being very precise with your vision on that no shoot. And this drill, kind of at the end of the day, kind of combining everything that you've done so far, I actually thought I did really well on it. Mostly A's on the partial, not on the no shoot, fortunately, and then maintaining speed with my transitions and the doubles. So that drill, at the end of the day, I actually felt like did a really good job of kind of wrapping everything up for the day. It's a very high round count drill. And yes, keep in mind that I was shooting the entire thing appendix after about 700 rounds, 650, 700 rounds, somewhere in that range. The Glock was very hot in my pants. So yes, Ben Stoeger's Glock got my PP very hot that day. So for me, great. I thought it was a fantastic day of shooting. It was a very high volume day of shooting for me. I usually don't shoot that much pistol in a day. My usual range sessions are somewhere between 400 and 600 rounds, but usually set up between 3 and 4 different things, mostly rifle. That's mostly what I shoot. So that was a very good experience to me. Actually getting really good diagnostics on what I'm doing wrong, because again, I'm probably not introspective enough when I'm shooting. I need to actually be a lot more focused, especially with my vision and other things. And there were a lot of problems that I wasn't necessarily aware of beforehand because I usually shoot by myself. And for a long time, I probably haven't been pushing myself or being disciplined enough to be as far along as I should be, considering how many rounds that I shoot. For instance, there was another gentleman there, because 20, 30 shooters there or whatnot, who had only been shooting for a year, and he was quite a bit better than I was. So I was like, I'm definitely doing something wrong. So the class for me, great. And listening to Ben, fantastic, all of the explanations. And of course, watching his demos is quite fun as well, just because, the level of shooting on display is somewhat hilarious compared to what you might see other places. And then Matt as well, consummate professional, and no issues whatsoever with that. The feedback while actually shooting the drills I thought was very good, and the explanations and the input from both of the instructors I thought meshed together really well. So I think that was a fantastic experience overall, and for me worth the price of admission. Now, one thing that I probably should mention is that this was not a intensely hands-on class. Like there wasn't that huge input on the incredibly technical specifics of a certain thing. So let's say you're a high-level shooter and you're really trying to work through a specific problem with whatever it is that you happen to be doing. So maybe for somebody who needs a very detailed walkthrough of a very specific thing and you want very technical analysis of what you should and should not be doing, maybe that learning style wouldn't work quite as well for you. For me, I appreciate the kind of go fast and we'll figure it out mentality. But again, depending on what level you are, how you like to learn, how you like to train, maybe not for everybody, but again, for me, fantastic. I had no issues with it whatsoever. Now, something that I do think will be good for me personally is that later on in the year, we have Joel Park and Nick Young actually in Watertown, South Dakota, which is just up the road for me. And that is about 8 months from now. So it'll be interesting to retake the class. This is a rifle pistol class, but seeing how implementing a lot of the stuff in my dry fire, in my actual live fire, and seeing the improvement over about 8 months. And I think that'll be really good for me. Now, if interested, of course, this is the Practical Shooting Training Group.com, where Ben Stoeger and friends have all their training classes listed, so you can go. Now, getting into story time, I should mention that I did not pay for the class. So again, we'll go back quite a ways. Several months ago, I had Matt and Ben on a live stream that went a little sideways. In fact, I think I called it the shit show for a reason. Now, most of the controversy and fallout surrounded Mr. Matt Pranka, who I was unaware of completely before that live stream. And during the live stream, I'm like, wow, this guy's kind of an asshole. However, after the live stream, after the fallout happened, consuming dozens of hours of his content, which is up on YouTube and other places for you to find, well, he still might be a little bit of an asshole, but he has a lot of fantastic information. You may not like the way that he says it, but that's mostly irrelevant. So since then, I've gained a lot of respect for Mr. Pranka. I think he's an asset to the community in general, and I think he does a lot of good callouts of nonsense in the industry and in training in general, which is not only hilarious to watch at times, but also, again, extremely useful. So now I'd had a few chats with Ben between that live stream. I actually had him on a separate live stream between then and the class. And I was looking at his website, I was looking at his classes and whatnot, and noticed that him and Matt were going to be in Arizona just a couple days before SHOT Show. So this is actually the class the couple days before. This is a pistol and rifle class, which I was not at, but I was at the pistol only class just the first day. On the second day, they did more of the dynamic stuff, which I feel like would also be really good for me as I don't practice a lot of that. So that would also expose a lot of weaknesses in what I do. So very last minute, I asked Ben, hey, is there anywhere I can show up on that Monday? Because I knew him and Matt were going to be there and just hang out. I wasn't even originally sure that if I was going to be shooting or not, just hanging out. And that was going to be enough. That was going to be just fine for me. I could hang out, chat, and meet these people in person because that is what I prefer to do. Live streaming is one thing, but if there's, some sort of miscommunication issue, beef, people threaten me, whatever it happens to be, I prefer to actually meet them in person. And so having been there, cool, awesome. Having Matt Pranka there, shake his hand, say hi, and, go from there. Now, I let Matt know ahead of time that I was going to be there because I didn't want to just jump scare him like, hey, remember me? I'm that guy from that live stream like 2 months ago where everything went south. So I end up flying into Las Vegas very, very late Sunday night, technically Monday morning. I leave at about 12:30. I make the 6-hour drive down to Arizona where the class was held. I sleep 45 minutes in a park and ride, and I show up to the class. Now, before we get to the next thing, I don't think that the sleep deprivation had any issues or impacted my performance. I feel like I shot about as good as I could, and that's mostly due to 1,200 milligrams of ibuprofen and 600 milligrams of caffeine. Now, when I arrived there first thing in the morning, Ben was like, hey, guess what? You're going to shoot the class. So I shot the class, and everything that I had was Glock 17 IWB holster and 400 rounds of ammo and an additional 350, 400 that I bought during lunch. So again, as far as the class experience goes, fantastic, no issues. It was great to run through all the different drills to really see where I was falling apart, what I was doing wrong. Very, very good learning experience for me. Personal equipment quibbles aside, like everything went basically fantastic. Now, something that I should very much note is that I attempted to pay Ben for the class experience and he declined. So not only did he let me shoot his personal Glock 47, but he also declined payment for me annoying him the entire day. So for that, I say thank you very much, Ben. It was a great class experience, and I look forward to going later this year as well. Now, me and Matt didn't talk very much at all. Shook hands, said hi, and maybe less than 10 words throughout the rest of the day. But other than that, very professional. I appreciated him being there, his insights on the drills themselves, and his explanation of things. It was nice to actually go and meet them and say hi face to face. So with all that out of the way, that was story time and class review. So I hope you all enjoyed. Go ahead and check out both Matt Pranka, Ben Stoeger, Joel Park, and of course, check out Practical Shooting Training Group. And with all that out of the way, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. God bless.